Okay, I think we're over time, so we're going to get started here. Thanks everyone for coming. Welcome everyone to session TS3, Exploring Energy Options for Water Production and Climate Resilience. This session is being co-convened by the United States Agency for International Development's new global project called WashFin2, that's Water, Sanitation, and Hygiene Finance 2, represented by myself, Dave Favaza, and by Aqua, Publica, Europa, represented by my co-session coordinator, Marine. So I'm a senior technical advisor with the WashFin2 program, which, as I said, is a USAID-funded program, which will run for about 5 years and eventually work in about 10 countries. The project coordinates with governments, financial institutions, service providers, and local stakeholders to close financing gaps and improve climate resilient performance of service providers, with an ultimate goal of mobilizing $375 million to the sector over that time. Maureen?
Good afternoon, my name is Marine and I work as a policy analyst for Aqua Publica Europea. In a nutshell, Aqua Publica is a network that brings together European public water operators, which provide sanitation and water services to over 80 million citizens. And the main mission of our network is really to promote the circulation of best practices and knowledge among members. But it is also to improve, through cooperation, the quality of the service that we provide to citizens. And we do this in Europe, but we also promote the cooperation of operators at the international level, and in particular by supporting the involvement of our members in WAP projects and in GWOPA. And so one of the burning issues that we want to address at the moment is the challenge of the energy efficiency. This is one of the reasons why we decided to propose to co-convene this session today, in order to explore together to what extent good practices from operators south and north of the globe can be replicated, in order to explore the role of WAPs in accelerating the uptake of efficient solutions, and in order to explore the implications of the challenge of the energy efficiency in different contexts. And I will hand it back over to Dave to say a few words about the session.
Thanks, Maureen. So we wanted to host a session that looks at some specific aspects of the Water Energy Nexus. We've seen exciting new work recently in renewable energy generation by utilities themselves, like solar and hydropower recovery, and a lot more attention just being put on energy efficiency, recognizing that energy is commonly the single largest non-labor cost that most utilities face. This is also important in light of emerging research in recent years showing that the sector's carbon footprint is larger than many of us had previously expected, with some estimates saying up to 15% of global greenhouse gas emissions are due to the sector. So these efforts are not only important for utilities' own financial viability and climate resilience, but also for broader climate change mitigation as well. So we've put together this session to explore ways in which we can facilitate increased investment in these areas, recognizing that this poses challenges and opportunities for the sector in finance, in governance and regulation, and in operations and management. So I'll let Maureen clarify our agenda and then we'll get started.
I think if we could get the agenda out, great. So we will start with an opening presentation setting the scene on the Water Energy Nexus. Then we will have the opportunity to hear two very interesting and different case presentations. And then we will move to a moderated high-level panel discussion with sector leaders representing the three areas that David mentioned previously. So finance, regulation and governance, and operations with Aqua Publica's member Hamburg-Wasser. And with that, I would like to introduce our first speaker. Dr. Irene Gunjiri is the director of the Strathmore University Water Governance and Innovation Hub in Kenya. She holds a PhD in regional and urban governance from the University of the Witwatersrand in South Africa, and a Master of Business Administration and a first-class honors degree in Bachelor of Commerce from the University of Nairobi. She will kick things off by setting the scene on the Water Energy Nexus. Irene, please, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Dave and Marine, for that kind introduction. And I have the honor and privilege of giving the introductory session on the Water Energy Nexus. And maybe the first thing that I would like to do is to help us understand what the Water Energy Nexus is. And we know that the Water Energy Nexus is really about the interactions and intricate linkage between energy and water. In other words, we are looking at the synergies and trade-offs between water and energy sectors. And in the end, what we would like to do in this particular section is to try and see how we can co-optimize the nexus between energy and water. And there we have a representation that tells us how this nexus actually works. We see that we can look at it in two perspectives. One is water for energy, and the other is energy for water. And as I continue with this particular presentation, we are going to see how this really plays out. We know that urbanization, supply and demand, and climate change and population growth are among the key drivers that affect the diverse correlation between water and energy. We know that water is needed to produce energy, and energy is required to produce water in terms of extracting, treatment, and also distribution. So, water and energy are two vital elements. They are vital elements that are necessary for economic growth. And the role of this energy water nexus is actually witnessed and seen a lot in places where there is scarcity. Yeah. When we lack water, then we begin to understand how the role of these two things plays out. So the focus then becomes on the ability to adapt water management policies and also sustainable energy consumption. And therefore, an integrated way of analyzing the nexus is needed to maximize efficiency of natural resources and to find optimum environmental policies. And in that last note, we are talking about the energy footprint of water and the water footprint of energy. Basically, we are looking at the environmental footprint of energy production as well as the footprint or that is produced by water consumption. So that relationship is very important, and it's good to keep it in mind as we move on. Now, next, we could ask the question, why look at the nexus? And yet, it is possible to independently analyze both water and energy. However, the multiplicity of the feedbacks and interdependencies that arise from the connection between the two and affect their sustainability would be overlooked if we decided to look at each of these components differently. Therefore, it is important to look at the nexus. And we know that the scarcity of one of these resources will normally have a knock-on effect on the other. So, for example, drought can prohibit power plant production. Yeah. And I would like to think about, in 2018, we all had the issue of day zero in Cape Town. Yeah. And day zero meant that there was actually no water that was going to be provided by the utilities. And then we also know that blackouts disrupt water treatment and distribution. Going back to the same country, South Africa, we know that right now they have what they call load shedding. And load shedding has been so intense, and it's actually affecting water treatment and distribution in the country. So we can see the codependence between the two resources. So the future may be different from the past as far as these two elements are concerned due to climate change, technology, and the evolving decision landscape. Yeah? When we look at the mix of factors that drive decisions with regards to water and energy, we see that there are lots of changes, But also, we see that the environment, the decision-making landscape, is ridden with very high levels of uncertainty, also thanks to technology. So that actually affects what is going to happen in the future. An integrated approach of managing water and energy is therefore required to solve the current and future resource challenges, and thus there is need to understand the interdependencies and interlinkages of these resources. Yeah. So again, going back to the element of water, we know that water scarcity, variability, and uncertainty are becoming prominent in leading the discussions on the vulnerabilities of the global energy system. But it's not all bleak, yeah, because we know that something that produces an opportunity for us is the fact that we have aging infrastructure. Yeah, aging infrastructure is actually bringing on an opportunity for changes. Yeah, there are changes that are happening, and when the companies or organizations would like to change their energy production because the infrastructure is aged, they can also examine these other options that could take them closer to zero emissions. Now, with regards to energy, a dilemma is not enough. A dilemma is not sufficient. Yeah. And for energy, we actually talk about a trilemma. Yeah. And a trilemma is just that act of trying to balance between the different points or the different pain points as far as energy is concerned. And if you look closely at the first triangle there, we are talking about energy security, environmental sustainability, and energy equity. Now, those two diagrams mean the same thing, could also be used interchangeably, yeah, and so we will not get into the pains of that. Now, what then is energy security? Energy security basically asks, are we able to access energy as and when needed? Can we get uninterrupted availability of energy? Is there an energy system that is able to respond to sudden changes in supply and demand? So in the end, we are asking, is it secure and reliable? But it's not only for the present, it's also about the future. Yeah. Can we secure the energy in the future? Next is energy equity. Can we provide universal access to reliable, affordable, and sufficient energy, both for domestic and commercial use? Is there access to electricity and clean cooking technologies? Yeah. Because we know, for example, in Africa specifically, 6 million people do not have access to energy, and 9 million people do not have access to clean energy. That's a big statistic, yeah, that we have to keep in mind. So is there equity? In other words, we are asking, is the energy affordable and available? Then thirdly, which is environmental sustainability, we are asking, can the system mitigate the potential environmental harm and climate change impact? Yeah, so we are asking, is the energy produced green and clean? Yeah, so those are good questions to ask. Yeah. And however, the story of the energy trilemma needs to take cognizance of the fact that we are dealing with two hemispheres. Yeah, the energy trilemma is a tale of two hemispheres. And so as we look at the pathways to net zero, we cannot treat unlike terms equally. They are different. And so each hemisphere faces unique and complex challenges, and these have to be taken into account. And so the progression has to take into account what the priority for each hemisphere is. So for example, in the south, it's about industrialization. In the north, it's about decarbonization. Yeah, so that's a delicate balance that has to be taken into account. Yeah, and so we know that the global south has less than 10% of the global renewable energy investment, and therefore a lot of time is needed to fully transition to a low carbon economy. And we could also ask, and it's a fair opportunity now to ask, what is the global south's competitive advantage with regards to energy transition, and what needs to be done to leverage this? Moving on is the arguments of the energy trilemma. So I'm going to present two of them in the interest of time. One is renewable energy. Yeah, and renewable energy is fantastic. It's an option that we have for reducing carbon emission. But can renewable energy sources adopt to provide accessible and reliable power given the growing demand and balancing between energy demand of an increasing population and environmental conservation? Yeah, so very interesting query, something to think about even as we continue with the discussions today. The other argument is energy poverty. We know that energy poverty and climate change are two sides of the same coin. Yeah, and that presents yet another issue that we need to think about. So energy poverty is entangled in environmental sustainability and energy security. So unaffordability makes energy equity untenable. Yeah, so in overcoming energy poverty, energy security and economic forces take precedence over environmental sustainability and energy equity. So very, very interesting things to think about. And so as I finish, and as a segue to the panel discussion that is going to take place, I would like us to look at what I call here the triad of support. Yeah, what are some of the things that we can put in place so that we can think deeper and better about the water energy nexus? And the first is finance. How do we increase access to finance for energy efficiency and renewable energy generation? Yeah. So what incentives should WOPs get so as to access finance for energy efficiency, both formal and informal incentives? What is there? What information are financiers looking for? And how can we help WOPs to do bankable projects that will make their proposals attractive to financiers? How do we help them also manage risk tolerance in that sense? Then regulatory and governance frameworks. We are looking at how to coordinate the energy and water sectors. It was interesting to listen to the Minister of Ethiopia, where they have one ministry for both water and energy. In Kenya, we have them separate with different advantages and disadvantages, but it was an interesting take-home, at least for me. How do we create policies that encourage good governance, accountability mechanisms, and monitoring and evaluation of the energy trilemma? And finally, is knowledge and capacity building related to water and sanitation utilities, who are now having to build and manage power facilities, which was not previously their job. Yeah. And when we think about these technology opportunities, and even in innovations and inventions, we have to think about the temporal and spatial applicabilities. Yeah, so it's more. Yeah, so there are things that we need to think about and that could stimulate our discussion this afternoon. And I look forward to hearing more from you. Those were some of the reference materials that I used, and thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Dr. Njuri. Indeed, finance and governance and regulation and operations all pose significant challenges, but also opportunities for further development of renewable energy in our sector. Next, I'd like to invite our first case presenter, Sumbi Shimwamba. Sumbi is a performance improvement specialist on USAID's WashFin 2 project. She works with me. She joined Tetra Tech, the implementer, in 2019 on the predecessor project called WashFin, which supported water service providers to improve performance through activities aimed at building their creditworthiness. Sumbi lives in Zambia, and she holds a Bachelor of Science in Engineering, Civil Engineering, a Master's in Construction Management, and also an MBA. Sumbi will talk about case studies from USAID WashFin's work in Kenya and Zambia on solarization of water pumping. Sumbi.
Thank you so much, David, for the introduction. Good afternoon, all. I am happy to be here to share our program's experiences in supporting solar solutions for improved water service provision for water service providers. USAID's WashFin 2 program is a 5-year global program that seeks to leverage partnerships to mobilize financing for climate-resilient water and sanitation services. My presentation today focuses on sharing experiences or lessons learned from our predecessor program, WashFin, that basically seeks to share on activities that have the potential for scale-up and also speaks to building resilience, which is in line with this year's Congress. So why solar? WashFin set out to support water utilities in implementing activities that would ultimately improve their operational efficiency. As we know, energy costs or energy is a key cost driver, ranking second to staffing costs. Many of the water service providers struggle to cover their costs. And for instance, in countries like Zambia, where there's a push to attain cost-reflective tariffs, it's expected that in the next few years, electricity costs will rise greatly. And to compound the problem further, water utilities have been experiencing unreliable grid supply as a result of using hydro energy, which has also been impacted by climate change. And then in the period of 2020 to 2021, a number of water utilities that we worked with experienced constrained cash flows, basically due to a lot of varying reasons. And some of the utilities were limited in their capacity to prepay for services that were on prepaid water systems. That is boreholes on prepaid metering. So WashFin essentially supported 2 countries, Zambia and Kenya, and particularly supported 4 water utilities. To be specific, Lusaka Water and Eastern Water in Zambia, Isiolo and Malindi in Kenya. WashFin supported the installation of hybrid solar pumping systems, and these are systems that use both solar and electricity from the grid, but set to prioritize the use of solar at any given point. The systems were also coupled with the installation of telemetry for real-time monitoring. The procurement also included, in some cases, procurement of pumps, motors, and procurement of spare parts. The scope also included the training of water service plant operators from the organizations that were supported. So in total, the project helped with the installation of 13 borehole facilities, solarized 13 borehole facilities with a total capacity of approximately 400 kilowatts and with a project size of approximately $600,000 US dollars. What's interesting to note is that obviously all these systems, because of their specific characteristics, had a different cost per unit. In Zambia, this dollar per watt cost was approximately $2, whilst in Kenya it was just above $1. Another interesting parameter to note is the cost of electricity. in Kenya relative to the cost of electricity in Zambia, which happens to be about 2.5 times more than that in Zambia. Over 60,000 persons were impacted by the project, and this was a limited bidding procurement for design and build contracts. And the procurement lasted 3 months, and also the installation lasted for over a period of 3 months. The first installations were done sometime in September last year. So now, how have these systems performed over the last 6 to 8 months of installation? To understand this a little more, I will focus onto or zero in onto a specific site in Lusaka, Zambia, and also focus onto a specific utility for the Kenya case. So according to the water service provider, this particular site had 24-hour access to grid electricity. However, in the period of November to February this year, Zambia experienced high levels of load shedding, power cuts, unprecedented 6 to 12 hours of power cuts a day. Obviously, with the presence of solar, this cushioned the impacts of load shedding, essentially improving the resilience of the facilities. What you see there is a graph of the energy that has been consumed by the facility since installation, with 18% of the energy being attributed to use of solar energy, which essentially means that grid electricity reliance has been reduced by 18% over this period, which directly translates to electricity cost savings of 18%. Obviously, this number is expected to change over time within a 1-year period, taking into consideration seasonality and issues of, for instance, power cuts. Moving on to Kenya, on the graph there you will notice 3 parameters that are being monitored: water production, energy costs, and also revenues. In blue are the monthly averages before installation, and in red the monthly averages after installation. We were able to notice that in Kenya, water production increased by 162%, and then also revenues increased by 26%. Electricity costs have also reduced by 62%. And then also there was a significant reduction in the number of customer complaints for this water utility. Most of the complaints were about non-availability of water. So we encountered a few challenges during the procurement and installation of these systems, but for want of time, I will focus on highlighting that there has been a slow uptake of the use of telemetry systems by some of the water utilities that received these facilities, and also limited O&M, even when they basically is very few things to do in terms of maintaining the systems. Again, in terms of opportunities, I will focus on sharing that there are a number of opportunities in both countries. Narrowing down to Zambia, the 2 water utilities that were supported in total have about 130 boreholes together. If, say, for instance, there were only 80 boreholes that had the capacity or that had the space for solar installation, you'd be looking at a project of a project size of 2.5 megawatts, which would probably translate to almost $3 million US. In October last year, Washfin supported a solar symposium in Kenya, which brought together regional actors, and there was also increasing interest to explore other methods of financing, such as lease and own facilities. So in Zambia, in both countries, let me put it like that, we undertook what we called viability assessments, which was basically financial analysis and also undertaking sensitivity analysis. In this financial analysis, the model assumes that the water utility is able to access financing from a commercial bank on commercial terms and make use of the savings from the O&M to repay this financing. And so the findings were that solar investments, particularly in Zambia, viable commercial financing alone is not currently viable, given the negative NPVs and low interest rate, low IRR. However, the projects may still be able to get financing, given that there are many compelling reasons to undertake such solarization projects. Those that we have already discussed, for instance, climate resilience, increase in revenues, reduction in costs, and then also with the stimulation of the market by having so many of the similar projects, it is likely possible that in the near future, conditions may change, which makes solar favorable. Conditions such as reducing the high cost of capital for the systems. So there are obviously financing challenges when it comes to solarization, such as an attractive financing terms, where a loan tenure can be very low, 5 to 7 years, against facilities such as this that have a useful life of over 25 years. And then also interest rates in certain countries are very high, and that is true for Zambia and Kenya. And so as a takeaway from this project, we noted that water service and sanitation providers still require assistance, possibly through grants, to be able to implement such projects so that they can realize the benefits that we are talking about. And also that such systems are suitable for large borehole facilities or well fields to make use or benefit from economies of scale. Looking at Kenya, for Kenya, however, solar investment is commercially viable in most of the cases, given the low installation costs. Most of the materials were sourced locally, unlike for Zambia, where they were coming outside of the country. And also, already discussed, the cost of electricity, grid electricity in Kenya is relatively higher. And also, some of the sites were using diesel for energy production. And the last 2 points essentially mean that there are definitely higher O&M cost savings in that regard. Just like Zambia, the water utilities in Kenya would also need support, but this would be specific to the unique characteristics of any site or any projects. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Sumbi, for this very interesting presentation. And it is now my pleasure to introduce our second case presenters, Yazan Dabas and Jörg Oppermann. Yazan is a mechanical engineer, and he has been working for the Miyayuna Water Company in Jordan for the past 8 years as head of the wastewater treatment plant section, and he is responsible for the operation and maintenance of 3 wastewater treatment plants. And Jörg Oppermann is a process engineer for wastewater treatment plants at the water company Hemispheres Bremen, where he has been working since 2012, and he is also a lecturer in environmental engineering at the University of Applied Sciences of Bremen. They are going to present their work on their WAP, which worked on energy efficiency and recovery in wastewater treatment plants.
Thank you, Verena, for the introduction. And it's my pleasure to welcome you in our session on our partnership experiences in energy analysis at Madaba Wastewater Treatment Plant. First, Jordan Water Company, Miyahuna, is an Arabic word which means our water, as a governmental company which provided water and wastewater services in 4 governorates in the middle of Jordan. With about 7 million inhabitants and 1 million customers. The area about 14,000 square meter, and we have 51 working pump stations and 31 booster stations. And we operate 7 wastewater treatment plants with 17.5 kilometers of water networks and 7.4 kilometers of wastewater networks. Total wastewater collected about 153 million cubic meters, and we treated about 26 million cubic meters in Miyahuna treatment plants. Madaba wastewater treatment plant. Madaba is a governorate located in south of Amman, in the middle of Jordan, with population about 214 inhabitants, 214,000 inhabitants, and the area about 1,000 square kilometer. Total water subscribers in Madaba city is 32,000, and 65% of them are served by sewage networks. Madaba wastewater treatment plant was a lagoon-based treatment system built in 1986 with design capacity is 2,000 cubic meter per day. Then in 2002, the plant expanded and upgraded to extended aeration activated sludge system with design capacity 7,600 cubic meter per day. The plant received wastewater from Madaba city networks as well as trucked septage. And the treated wastewater are used for agriculture field crops. Water operator partnership. Me and my colleagues from Miyahun and Hans Wasser participate in the networking events, and we make visits on each other plant in job shadowing and knowledge transfer, and we have experience exchange. We start the analysis by comparing the data from our plants, and we consider the German rules by the DWA in the energy check and energy analysis. And this to my colleague.
Thank you. I have the pleasure to go a little bit deeper into energy analysis. And the set of rules we use for the German water sector, all German wastewater treatment plants have to use it to look where they can reduce their energy consumption. And so we ask ourselves if we could also do it in Jordan with the same set of rules we use in Germany. And so we started with an energy check. The energy check is just to overview how much energy you need, and you only need values you already have. The load coming to your treatment plant and also the energy consumption you have in your treatment plant. And so you have a specific energy consumption per inhabitant connected to your treatment plant, and then you can compare to other plants. We compared between Germany and Jordan, but you can also do it in other countries and compare the values you have. This is the first overview. You can also use it further on as a monitoring system. If you do it every month or every half year, you can see how your energy consumption per inhabitant is going on, if it starts to grow or is it decreasing, if you have energy options you just did and realized. After that, we go deeper into detail with an energy analysis. That means that we have a complete consumer matrix of the whole treatment plant. We started it with online sessions with the colleagues and started to prepare all the Excel sheets and so on, that with a visit in Madaba, we can do the energy analysis in 3 days. Some photos of our work at Madaba. You see a lot of colleagues working at the seam, because one of our favorite things is not to give knowledge transfer to 2 or 4 shoulders. We spread it very far, that a lot of colleagues have knowledge about making energy analysis, and we also need electrical influence, we also need mechanical influence, and we need the process knowledge for the wastewater treatment. And all combined in one analysis is the main reason we do with a lot of people doing it. And we hope that this knowledge transfer will work on for years, that the colleagues can do it in future on their own, and only maybe if there are some small parts, they can ask us, but they normally should do this energy analysis on their own. After the consumer matrix is built, we find out some different ways to save energy, and we can cluster it. We can show there are maybe some energy possibilities to save without any investment. Maybe we need a short-term investment with a refund in 3 years, 2 years. Or if we have depending measures that will maybe have a return of invest in 10, 15 years. So we are not only looking what we can do now, we make a plan for the next 10, 15 years, what the operator can do, and maybe in 10 years a pump has to be changed, and we now think about what can we do, thinking about energy optimization for a change in 10 years. We prepare that, so if the pump is damaged, the operator knows what to do and to save energy with the change. We also can produce some graphics to show how much energy we need for the treatment plant, how much energy we should have needed, and what are the potential we can save, and in which area of the treatment plant is this potential. We can also show which aggregates are the ones who need the most of the energy or can bring the most energy efficiency in this case. And we also can show if how much potential we have in a short term and how much potential we have in a longer term. Especially if we think about funding, it is very important that we show that all the things we can do now are finished, and that all the other things that are open need a funding and need a longer term for a return of invest. We can also bring all this information to the management level. At the management level, mostly you don't discuss about energy saving at first. Normally you don't discuss about kilowatt hours per year. You discuss about euro, dollar, or Jordan dinar. And we can also transform the information we have from the energy side to the management level to convince to go the way together. So we found out that the energy analysis we do in Germany with a set of rules from the German water sector, we can also do in Jordan, and it's very important to do it, not only in Germany and in Jordan, I think worldwide, to reduce the energy consumption of our treatment plants, to get better in using energy that is achievable. And we have this set of rules we have knowledge about, and we saw that it is not easy, but good to give the knowledge transfer and to enable other operators to use the same set of rules. And the good thing is the German water sector always published it in English, so we can transport it also. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much, gentlemen, for a very interesting presentation. At this point, we had thought about taking a few questions from the audience, but I think in the interest of time, we'll move directly to our panel discussion, and then we can hopefully take questions from the audience for the panel and for the speakers at the end. Okay, so now actually I'd like to turn things back over to Dr. Jajiri, who's going to help us moderate the panel discussion. Thank you. And she'll introduce our panelists for today.
Thanks, David. I now have the singular pleasure of introducing our three panelists, who I would like to come up to the stage as I introduce them. The first panelist is Harald Schozel, who has been a lead water specialist at the European Investment Bank for over 19 years, after obtaining a master's degree in civil engineering in 1992 and later in economics. He worked as a consulting engineer. After spending 3 years in Ecuador as a water engineer for the German Development Service, now GIZ, he joined the United Nations in Fiji as a water expert for the South Pacific. Before joining the EIB in 2004, he worked as a consultant and project developer for the German water utility Gelsenwasser. At EIB, Harald has worked on more than 100 water infrastructure projects in more than 40 countries. He has developed and monitored water operators partnerships in Malawi and currently preparing a partnership with Zambia in wastewater sector. His particular area of expertise is project finance, desalination, and peri-urban development. Kindly give him a round of applause. Next, I have the pleasure of introducing Engineer Kelvin Chitumbo, who is the director of Zambia's water sector regulator, the National Water Supply and Sanitation Council. He is a water regulation expert with more than 20 years of experience in water utility regulation and reform, policy development, restructuring, and financing, and services provision. Let's put our hands together for Engineer Kelvin Chitumbo. And finally, I have the pleasure of introducing Anne Wendland, a civil and environmental engineer who has been working in the field of water and sanitation for more than 25 years. His current position at the water operator Hamburg Waza is head of division for water production and wastewater treatment. He's responsible for the operation and maintenance of 16 production facilities and 1 wastewater treatment plant, one of the largest in Germany. Currently, he's involved in water operators partnerships with 2 Tanzanian utilities, Kuwasa and Kashwasa, in terms of management support. Please let us put our hands together for Arnold Wendland. And now, gentlemen, I have the task of asking you a few questions, which the audience would like to listen to after all the presentations that have taken place. So I will start with Harald from EIB. I would like to ask, what is the EIB doing in terms of its mission objectives to support projects in the Water Energy Nexus in developing countries, and what elements or conditions should a project ideally meet so as to be eligible for support from EIB? Are the microphones on?
Well, no, it works this way. Well, sorry, if I'd known it would take so long to read my short CV, I would have, well, not put so much in it. I didn't know that. Well, I'd like to start with the good news because we heard something about financing and so on. And as I work for the European Investment Bank, I can assure you there is no shortage of financing. There is a shortage of good projects and capacity to implement projects. But it's certainly not a question of whether there is financing. And there's, speaking for the EIB, long-term financing ahead, well, available in abundance, I'd say. Yeah, so we offer conditions for 20 years, 25 years, exactly tailored to the economic lifetime of these investments we've just heard. So what do we do in terms of the Water Energy Nexus? Well, first, to us, it is much more than energy efficiency, obviously. Yeah? We now, as the EU climate bank that we are no longer focusing even on energy efficiency. Yeah? We are setting, well, I'd like to call them carbon efficiency targets, yeah? Because in the end, it is not a matter of whether you consume 1 kilowatt more per hour or not, if that results in higher emissions. Right? What we're focusing on is low emissions, and unfortunately, that is not always the same. You know, obviously, it is better, well, the best energy or best renewable energy is the kilowatt hour you don't use, but if you look at it in a holistic way, then you might even find better solution in terms of carbon footprint if it's not super optimized, yeah, in all aspects. It might be counterintuitive, but obviously a very energy efficient system, well, would be easier to integrate. But if it is a matter of optimizing, or the matter is to optimize both. So what do? We run a lot of studies to demonstrate that particularly large transmission schemes can be run entirely on renewable energy, that there is no need to look at, well, diesel-powered backups or other fossil-fueled options anymore. It is possible, particularly in the south. Many of these countries have such stable sunshine and such predictable sunshine levels that it is really amazing. The problem is indeed the cost. The ratio for projects we're financing, for instance, in Malawi, which we insist should all be battery-powered, by the way, is that they're roughly 3 to 4 times more expensive than they would be if we built them in Germany. Yeah? The costs are extraordinarily high, and there's certainly an issue for governments and institutions like ours to establish these markets and not rely on very small providers to get a couple of solar panels into these countries. Yeah? There has to be a big push for this, and because there's no reason why a solar panel should cost 3 times more than it costs in Germany than in Malawi, in my view. So we are doing these studies. We are focusing on the carbon footprint, and I think I'll leave it at this stage for that. From a time perspective, or you have a different or another question?
No, for now that's good, and I think it's very good that you give us good news that money is available. Maybe as we come back for round 2, my query is why people are not looking for it, and we can discuss that a bit later. Now, moving to Engineer Chitumbo, one of the drawbacks that water utilities face habitually during water treatment processes is the large financial costs and energy consumption. As a consequence, governments are developing programs to help public water systems and wastewater treatment facilities to manage their energy use. There is a proposal for regulators and utilities to incorporate appropriate energy use metrics in their routine performance assessments. Before setting on appropriate indicators, then regulators need to set achievable objectives to provide a strategy to achieve objectives. What are the drivers that need to be achieved for setting objectives and establishing an energy performance indicator system?
Thank you, and thank you for having me. Obviously, the challenge of climate change cannot be overemphasized, and the issue of the need for sustainable service delivery. And energy costs actually has quite some impact in terms of service provision. And I think as a regulator, we are interested in that. And hence, it is some discussion that we think is important to have. And traditionally, I think in terms of energy use and consumption, we've been reporting monetary values. But I think it's important also to look at what exactly should we be monitoring and also reporting, so that we can go to the detail of the specific improvements that needs to be done by reporting and also measuring what is important for the water sector. And I think in the water sector, pumping becomes very critical, and hence that energy that pumps water needs to be monitored and look at strategies that need to be put in place to try and ensure utilities are more efficient. Obviously, the regulator becomes very critical in that aspect, in the sense that the regulator is able to put up standards, regulations, and guidelines that can motivate utilities to improve their operations as far as energy is concerned. But I think the issue of alternative energy also becomes something that we need to look at, especially that the costs of electricity at the end of the day is passed on to you and me. And if we are not efficient in terms of use of electricity, then it becomes difficult for us to manage that cost. And definitely it means water is more expensive than it's supposed to be. And hence, I think from the regulatory point of view, we think it's a discussion that needs to be had. And together we need to be able to agree in terms of what we should be monitoring in terms of energy. And I think some of the drivers of the issue of alternative energy have to do with the issue of sustaining the environment. How do we sustain the environment? And everyone is talking about environmental sustainability. And I think there is a pressure for everyone to be able to look at that. And that obviously can be a driver. The issue of reducing emissions, the issue of clean air becomes critical. And I think we need to look at that, and that can be a driver. But also in terms of the regulation compliance, the demand to comply by regulators and governments and local authorities also can drive how we move as far as being efficient in terms of energy use. But there's also public demand in terms of this climate change, and everyone is saying, can we do something about it? And obviously that applies pressure as well, and it can be a driver to try and see how we can attend to the issues of being efficient as far as energy is concerned. So there's an increase in terms of awareness on climate by the public, and they want to see that we are doing something in terms of reducing the cost of production, and the service or the gains are passed on to the customers.
Thank you very much, Engineer, for that. They say what gets measured gets done, and you ask a very pertinent question: what should be measured? It's not just about measuring; it's knowing specifically what it is. And I think what is also interesting is that if there is no inefficiency, it passes on to me, yeah, as a consumer of the water service. Okay, moving on to Anne, who works for Hamburg Water. For the majority of water utilities, drinking water and wastewater plants typically are the largest energy consumers, often accounting for 30 to 40% of total energy consumed. By making energy efficiency practices incorporated into these wastewater plants, utilities can save up to from 15 to 30%, and that way reducing the payback time of the investments that are placed in energy efficiency. So what practices has Hamburg Water employed to improve energy efficiency and energy generation in the treatment of water and wastewater? Over to you.
Thank you for the question. No? Is there a button? I'll take this one. Thank you for the question once again. Well, first of all, for us as a big utility for water services, it's essential to reduce costs. And it was, in the past, it was always the key driving factor to reduce energy. So therefore, we were really very keen on, very eager in increasing energy efficiency. It turns more and more now also to the view on reducing to the mitigation of the climate changes impact. So, but I will state that we have three main aspects we are looking on in our utility, and that's first of all the energy efficiency. Then it's the energy itself being within the wastewater matrix, and then also renewable energies, to use renewable energies. And I would start with energy efficiency. So I told you that we are improving our energy efficiency during the last decades already. And well, we look in particular on those facilities which are very intensive energy consumers. And we determined target values for that, and we are still monitoring energy values and also compiling such specific energy consumption values. From that, we derive certain measures to improve the operation system itself, or to go deeper and to change also components of our plants. And then, of course, we look on the payback time of the investment we have to do. But this is what we really do in a very intensely way. And one good example, for instance, is that we changed the aeration system of our wastewater treatment plant. In former times, we had the surface aeration system that's also driving in Amman. But we did a very clear and deep calculation on that, and we changed to bubble aeration system, and we reduced our energy consumption in that part of the treatment plant to a half. So this is really a big jump on the way to high efficiency. Well, wastewater contains a lot of energy, and we also, get the energy out of it and use it for producing electricity, for drying sludge. We have a digestion process where we generate a gas. We have that much gas nowadays that we also treat the gas to a quality of biomethane, and we sell it to the gas grid utility. And this is also a sign where you can see that we really use as much as energy out of the wastewater as we can. And the third aspect is the renewable energy. In northern Germany, we have a lot of wind, and so we have already now 4 very big wind generators with each more than 3 megawatt. And we have also solar power facilities on our plants. And in total, when you look on all of this, we can cover the energy demand for our wastewater treatment for more than 100%. And for the whole utility, there belongs also the water treatment plant to about 70%. And our goal will be to go up to 90%. So we are still eager in that.
Okay, maybe just as a follow-up of those very interesting practices, I would like to ask, to what level do you think those experiences can be replicated or adapted in different contexts, and how would water operators, WOPs, contribute to this capacity development effort?
As we learned from you, it was you, I think, who told us that there are different hemispheres, and we always have to look on the circumstances we do have. And I think, well, we have to look exactly on that, what we can adapt or what we can transfer to special situations in the WOP context, and what we cannot transfer to it. But I think the WOP is the very, very good basis for that. We have a platform, I call it a platform of trust and open discussion, what we have. And on that platform, we really can discuss about the problems, the challenges which are existing, and then we look on the best practices. And from that we derive measures then like solar power, like whatever energy efficiency. We heard a lot about it for today. So I can only give a sort of blanket answer on your question. So I cannot tell you now, well, all of you have to work with solar power in the future. So I think there are also other constraints. So we heard about this also. Therefore, just this, well, more or less open answer. But I think the basis is the discussion we are doing with on peer-to-peer level, and that's the key.
Okay, very, very safe answer, that it's context dependent, and it's true, because we are all looking at this particular thing from different perspectives. Engineer Chitumbo, I would like to ask, what in your experience have been the main drivers and also constraints towards the push to renewable energy generation by water utilities in Zambia?
Yeah, I think the issue of the cost of savings becomes critical if you have to look at issues of energy. And what I mean there is that if you know that you can save by maybe having some alternative, and especially that the cost of production as far as energy is concerned seems to be high. And we have to look at how do we reduce the costs. For example, do you need to pump or use gravity? So that has to do with the way you design your systems. But also the requirement to be efficient in terms of operational efficiency also should be able to create some incentives for utilities to deal with that. But at times, the regulator might put up, they might set the goals, for example, for renewable energy goals, and depending on the capacities for the utilities to be able to respond, that obviously can be a constraint to the utilities. But obviously, we need to look at what incentives can unlock those constraints. I also earlier on mentioned the issue of the demands by the public at times to ensure utilities, are focusing on reduction of energy. That obviously can be a driver, but depending on how we interact with the public again, it can be a constraint because it would discourage utilities if every time they are seen in bad taste. So there are some of these constraints and drivers, depending on where you sit and how you deal with them, can be either. For example, a regulator ideally should put up incentives that should be able to drive utilities to do something that is positive. But again, they can put up rules and regulations that can inhibit the progress that is expected. So those are some of the experiences that we've seen. And I think as regulator, you need to be a bit more logical in terms of the regulations that you put in place, such that we create an incentive, an environment that incentivizes the utilities in terms of looking at options and also how they can be efficient as far as service provision is concerned.
Thank you very much for that. I think what I'm hearing is that it's a delicate balance on the part of regulators. There needs to be the regulation, obviously, but then to ensure that the regulation does not hinder water service providers from doing what they need to do. Thank you. And now back to Harold. I would like to ask you, to what extent would WARP help beneficiaries to strengthen the capacities needed to manage these kinds of projects, like what you had talked about earlier, of the Energy Water Nexus and increasing, moving from energy efficiency to emission reduction? So in that case, what is your role? How would you support? How would WARP help their beneficiaries? And what is a good WARP in your perspective?
Yeah, I actually dreaded this question. We discussed it before because I find it really difficult to give a coherent answer to that because it links so many. Yeah, you have these. Well, the water energy nexus is a very encompassing aspect, yeah, and a WARP is something that is very targeted in my view. So here with a WARP, you certainly start to focusing on energy efficiency, and we've heard how this works, and that obviously an energy audit works in every context. Well, that is very clear to me. Yeah, it doesn't really depend on. When you compare a German utility where you have the most sophisticated processes and you squeeze out a little percentage and so on, but in many utilities, well, elsewhere, yeah, well, you're talking not a fraction of a percentage, but, well, 10% or 20%, because pumping continues 24 hours, even the reservoir is full. So obviously the method's going to be difficult. I think the key point is raising the awareness and the possibility and but trying to find an agreeable approach within the context. Yeah, my view is most utilities elsewhere would run also very nicely if there was enough financing available. Yeah, the key is, in my view, over my, rather long career by now, that it's not so much a capacity problem. In each utility where I work, you find very well-educated people. The problem is that only education is not enough. You have to have the means to implement that. Yeah, if you can't buy the fuel to go to drive and look for non-revenue water or well, let's say leaks, yeah, then it doesn't matter whether you understand the topic or not. So for us, WOPs, it is, well, part of our toolkit, I'd like to say. Yeah, well, I see here in the audience people we started 16 years ago almost, yeah, setting these WOPs up. And what I should rather ask them how they saw it and what their experience was. I'd say many things work very well, but I must admit we also didn't really have any idea back then when we started. Obviously, this would be now much better. Yeah, we started looking at WOPs more, and because I work for a public bank, we've got to procure usually within a project context these WOPs. Yeah, I began to look at it more like a performance contract, which it isn't. Yeah, it's a partnership, and the partnership is not contractual. But there is a kind of, field, that where we as financing organizations need to kind of balance out the real, the results that we would like to have and balance that with the partnership approach, and in the same way making sure that there is value for money. I realize it's only 3 minutes, so I stop. So we do that. I said we are currently procuring a water operator partnership, if possible, for Zambia, Lusaka Water and Sanitation. And, well, I think if there's questions, I can also answer them later.
Very good answer, in spite of the fact that you didn't like the question initially, but well done. Yeah? But in fact, just a quick one, because we have 2 minutes, and I would like to find out how governments can facilitate access to finance for water operators from the perspective of EIB, an organization like yours.
With a specific focus to governments. Like I said, there is, on the one hand, there is no shortage of financing. I'm very adamant with that point. But obviously, I also touched this point. There's a problem with partnerships. Yeah, we need to tender. We need to demonstrate that what we are financing provides value for money, and that is usually not being created via a handshake between two CEOs. Yeah, we need to go through a procurement process. I believe we have means to do that. And the key, and that is where I think government plays, like always, the decisive role to create transparency and supervise the process properly, for instance, through a regulator. But not all countries have a regulator, and not all countries have a strong regulator. And unfortunately, not all countries have a very transparent process and good governance. So this is, well, that is what my answer would be. Yeah?
Okay, thank you very much. And I would like to thank our panelists, because you've done a great job at answering all the questions. And I think we could give them a round of applause at this point before we ask them the questions. Yeah, and I want us to bring the discussions to a close at this point, but not the session. And now we are opening up the floor to the audience to give feedback, and you have a chance to talk to the panelists about the different aspects that have been raised. And I would also like to call the previous presenters to come to the front in case someone wants to address a question directly to you. And then David and Marine, in fact, you don't need to take microphones. Okay. All right. So I see a number of questions in the audience. We can start with the gentleman. And please introduce yourself and tell us to whom the question is directed.
Muchas gracias. Mi nombre es Jorge Rubio Olivares, soy de La Piedad, Michoacán, México. Somos un organismo público descentralizado del gobierno municipal. Tenemos un trabajo continuo de 25 años y ya hemos trabajado precisamente en lo que es la eficiencia energética. Nada más para grandes rasgos decirles, tenemos 100,000 habitantes aproximadamente. Hace 25 años iniciamos con los proyectos de eficiencia energética y decirles que en el lapso de 25 años con los programas que llevamos, estamos consumiendo prácticamente la misma energía en kilowatts que actualmente, con el doble de usuarios registrados en el padrón de usuarios. Todos nuestros equipos trabajan de acuerdo a la norma oficial mexicana en cuanto a eficiencia electromecánica. Entonces, hemos sido muy eficientes, pero ahorita queremos dar el paso a lo que es la instalación de paneles solares. En México los programas de los gobiernos, del gobierno federal no incluye estos apoyos y bueno, en este caso yo no sé si el banco aquí nos pudiera brindar asesoría, apoyo para lograr contar con el proyecto y a su vez llevar a cabo un financiamiento. Hemos trabajado muy bien, tenemos buenos resultados también en la eficiencia energética, entonces ya creo que dimos un paso importante. Estamos consumiendo mucho menos energía de la que estábamos tendiendo hace 25 años.
La pregunta es por mí.
Sí, para el banco, sí.
Okay. Voy a responder en inglés, ¿ya? Por la, okay. Of course we can, but I mean, it's a very concrete question. Yeah? We can speak afterwards if you like about it. Yes, there are programs available. Like I said, I'm not sure that we had many projects in Mexico, but I think whether it is eligible because of the elevated economic status, but I do believe it is. So we can speak afterwards.
Oh, okay, thank you very much. There is a question. There is a question at the back. Yes, kindly ask the question. Yes, please, yes.
Thank you very much. My name is Yoram. I'm coming from Zambia. I'm a CEO of one of the utility companies in Zambia. The first question goes to Herod. Herod, in your own words, since you indicated that there's no lack of resources in terms of finances, what are really the main ingredients that should compose a good project proposal, just in simple terms? Then the other one is a comment to Sombi, just to also indicate that especially in Zambia, there are quite a lot of opportunities in terms of investment, especially solar, as we have quite a lot of underground sources which are actually even cheaper to harness in Zambia especially. If you get to a place such as Central Province, where I'm coming from in Zambia, you'll find that underground sources can be found even as deep as maybe 15 meters. So it's really cheaper to harness with the available solar potential that is there, just an addition. But to Kelvin, my question is, don't you think that it's important to probably enhance the indicators to also probably be flexible, you know, as a regulator, to ensure that maybe water utility companies are given these indicators which point so much to energy, rather than sticking to traditional ones which are basically talking about maybe non-revenue water and the likes? Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Maybe we could start in the order the questions were asked. So, Harold.
Well, thank you. We appear to be very popular today. unlike the Germans in the European vision context. So a good project, usually the response is the project's got to be bankable. Frankly, even after 20 years, I don't think there is really a unique description of what is bankable. My view is you have to have a plan. That is the most important thing. You have to have an idea where you want to be with your utility at some point. Yeah, and this is what we were hoping to achieve with the WOPs. And again, I refer to the people in the audience here. To establish a regular investment pattern. Yeah, when I had the benefit of working also a lot in European countries, being with the European Investment Bank, and the thinking is not in projects, at least not primarily. Whilst when we go outside, when we go to Africa, we always think about projects. And now we kind of call them series of projects or whatever, in terms of disguising still the punctual approach that it has. So when we work, and that is my main expectation from WOPs, come and design a stable investment path, and have a target where to end up, and the rest is basically, well, designing it properly and efficiently. But again, where would you like to be in 10 years with that utility?
Sumbi, please.
The second contribution was basically a comment in support of the presentation that we had made. Indeed, there are many opportunities. I think going forward, what we need to do is awaken the water utilities to these opportunities that are available, and also awaken other supporters such as cooperating partners and developing partners to help the water utilities package these opportunities in such a manner that they can attract financing.
Thank you very much. And finally, engineer.
Thank you. I think the issue of what we measure becomes critical, and I think, as already indicated, traditionally we're looking at the monetary value, but I think if we have to deal with efficiency in terms of energy use, we need to relook at that. And if you notice that, in the report 2022, when we're reporting performance, there's an attempt to refocus in terms of what we report. For the first time now, we are reporting also the kilowatt hour per cubic meter of water, but also in terms of the currency per kilowatt hour, which was not being reported. But going forward, I think, yes, we need to be flexible and begin to agree in terms of what exactly should measure that will have more impact in terms of being efficient as far as energy cost is concerned.
Thank you very much. One last question. Okay, so let us appreciate our panelists for this particular session. Let us give them a round of applause. So thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen, for the wonderful job done. And now I hand on the yield control to Dave or Marie.
Just to say thank you to everyone for attending this session on behalf of the co-conveners, USAID's Washwind Project 2 and Aqua Publica Europea. I hope you found it as insightful as we all did. And if you wish to continue the discussion, you're very welcome to come and find us after the session. So wish you to enjoy the rest of the Congress.